Hello, and welcome to the first instalment of Spooky Storytime with me, Vicky from Pallas Athena. Tonight we will discuss Lilith. Pour a drink, sit back, and enjoy. So the way that we write tracks in Pallas Athena is that James, our guitarist, will send us over a fully written track instrumentally, and then I will come up with the lead vocal line, the choirs, any backing vocals and lyrics. Usually this includes coming up with a concept, but the preliminary title for this track was actually already Lilith, so I didn't need in this case to come up with a concept because I thought Lilith would be a really cool idea to explore and a really cool character to explore. So I did quite a bit of research into Lilith. And she actually appears in many different forms, in many different historical and theological texts, but she is best known as the wife of Adam in Abrahamic religion. Unlike Eve, she left Adam as she refused to be subservient to him. After leaving the Garden of Eden, she was then found in the Red Sea by angels who tried to convince her to come back to the garden and be with God, but she refused. In the Red Sea, she had been copulating with demons and married the archangel Samael, to whom she had given many demonic babies. And thus, she firmly cemented herself as the demonic queen that we know her as today. A fun fact, after the fall of the Garden of Eden, Adam spent 130 years separated from Eve, during which Lilith went to him and satisfied him at night. They then had a son who became a frog. Lilith is usually depicted as a half-woman, half-bird creature, complete with wings and talons, who is intent on tormenting men, and in some texts, even pregnant women and children. She is a demon, which means she is a malevolent, non-human entity intent on causing pain, harm, and chaos. The image of Lilith dates back to antiquity, in which she appears again as a demonic bird woman in Sumerian, Mesopotamian, Greek, and Babylonian texts. I just want to say as a side note, here I have given a very, very broad description of Lilith here, and that's all I'm going to give of that, because as interesting as it is, it doesn't actually have any relevance to my lyrical choices, and because she appears in so many different ways, and there are so many different discrepancies between the Abrahamic texts and the ancient texts, it could literally go on forever. So I will end that section here and go on to describe Lilith also being known as a succubus, because that's really where I took the angle of the song, and there's a particular paranormal hotspot in the UK which really inspired my version of Lilith. The ancient Ram Inn in Gloucester is located in the market town of Wotton-under-Edge. Reverend John Yates, former Bishop of Gloucester, is said to have called the ancient Ram the most evil place I have ever had the misfortune to visit, after a failed attempt at exorcism. The building dates from 1145 AD and is known as one of the UK's most haunted buildings. The pub has been featured on programmes such as Ghost Adventures, Most Haunted and Great British Ghosts. It is also highly investigated by many paranormal groups, and there's even the opportunity to stay the night. Prior to the building, the land was used as a pagan burial site that lies on ley lines that trace directly to Stonehenge. If you're unfamiliar, ley lines are lines drawn between various historic structures and landmarks that are believed to carry energy, which is why many paranormal events and occurrences happen at these sites that lie upon ley lines. However, scientists and archaeologists regard that as a load of bullshit. Many spirits are purported to occupy the inn, including that of a witch who was said to have been burnt at the stake in the area during the 1500s. Fleeing her trial, she fled to the inn for refuge, but was unfortunately recaptured and burned. Her spirit still haunts the room now known as the Witch's Room, with many who have stayed the night waking up with the witch herself looming over them by the side of the bed between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m, which is known in the paranormal world as the witching hour, when entities and spirits are at their most powerful. In the room named the men's kitchen, the previous owner John Humphreys found evidence of ritual sacrifice buried underneath the fireplace. Evidence of objects such as knives and daggers were found buried amongst the bones of children, which suggests that these were not only sacrifices, they were child sacrifices. Visitors to the building have even claimed to hear the sound of babies crying in this room. The bishop's room is reportedly the most haunted room in the entire building. Apparitions of dark, hooded monk figures have been frequently seen by visitors in this room, many of whom refuse to stay there after hearing screams in the middle of the night and witnessing furniture being flung across the room. The screams heard are reported to be that of a man who was reputedly murdered here by having his head thrust into the fire. The most aggressive manifestations occupy this room, with mediums and members of paranormal groups claiming to have been physically attacked during investigations and even flung across the room by unseen forces. The attic of the building is also a hotspot for the paranormal. The story goes that in the early 1500s, the innkeeper's daughter was murdered, apparently hanged. Visitors who stay overnight have claimed to have heard a heavy dragging noise coming from the attic. All of the spirits and stories surrounding the ancient Ramin are fascinating, but the one I've always been especially fascinated by is the one which Lilith is inspired by. A succubus is a demon in female form, particularly known to take the shape of a beautiful human female to entice men in their sleep, seduce them, and engage in sexual activity. Many examples of succubi-like creatures exist throughout history and mythology, such as the demonic Lamia in Greek mythology, and again the Greek demigoddess Empusa. There are many stories of succubi stealing men, seducing men, and stealing their sperm to give birth to half-human, half-demonic entities. Look back to Adam and Lilith's frog. And men who engage in sexual activities with succubi are said to deteriorate physically and mentally, and even die. The former owner of the ancient Ramin, John Humphreys, claimed that each night in his sleep he would be awakened by a succubus who resided in the pub. She would try to initiate sex with him every single night. And this is where my inspiration for Lilith came from, the idea of a succubus coming to a man each night and enticing him to his doom. The music of the song Lilith itself is alluring, hypnotic, exotic, primal, and very chant-like, with repetitive, grooving movement and riffs. For me, this tied in perfectly with the idea of an ancient seductress, a demonic siren-like woman who allures and entices. And for the most part of the song, the lyrics depict this version of Lilith. If we look at the lyrics later on in the song, I could not hold on to you, so I chose to destroy you instead. The music really takes a turn, and I wanted this to be reflected in the lyrics. I wanted to make the character of Lilith more multidimensional, and the music itself is very lament-like at this point, and I wanted the lyrics to feel that lamentation of the music, and in a way a feeling of regret for her former actions. For me, Lilith really coincides with the modern figure of the Femme Fatale. Femme Fatales are often depicted in films, books and music as women who appear beautiful, seductive and enchanting, but underneath the surface are wanton and wicked, and seek to only consume, destroy and devour the men who are unfortunate enough to cross their path. A classic example of this is Glenn Close's character in Fatal Attraction, Alex Forrest. Alex is successful, beautiful, cultured, intellectual, and so irresistible to Michael Douglas's character, a married man with a family, that he spends the night with her. Despite leading her on, he rejects her after this one night, and she becomes relentless in her obsession with him, to the point where she tries to kill him and his family, the infamous bunny boiler scene where the mother finds the child's pet bunny rabbit boiling away on the hob. Personally, I've always disliked this perception of women, as it makes these fatale figures out to be so one-dimensional, when actually these figures are very multifaceted and more than just bad for the sake of being bad. If we look at Lilith, she is kicked out of the Garden of Eden for refusing to be subservient to Adam. Even when he tries to take her by force, because he tries to use her and have sex with her even though she doesn't want to, she refuses to. She is the one who is the wrong, and she is the one who is cast out. Of course, in both the case of Lilith and Alex Forrest in Fatal Attraction, Their actions following their rejections are really not okay, as it's never okay to hurt anyone else. However, if we look at these women as more than just bad and evil at surface level, we can see that they have pain in their past, and things that have happened to them have made them choose those choices that we perceive to be evil and bad on the surface. Their past forces them to have no other choice than to live lives that wreak havoc and cause harm. And the shaping of the femme fatale figure herself is built upon the fine line that women, even today, have to ride between sin and sexuality. Patriarchal society expects us as women to be desirable and to be sexually available to those who desire us. But when we indulge in our own sexual desires and explore that sexuality, we are painted as sluts and whores. Throughout history, women have been painted as the weaker sex, the corruptible, the wanton, the cause of men's downfalls and deterioration. We are expected to be desirable, but desire itself makes us destructive. This shaping of women is still very much alive today, for example in discussions around victim blaming, where women are blamed for violent acts enacted upon them for their behaviours, their looks and their clothing, despite the fact that society, patriarchal society even, expects us to be that desirable, to be that available, to be that sexy, available woman. But because we are that sexy, available woman, we cause men to have their downfall. Nothing's really changed since the Bible. I feel like this hypocrisy is a really, really important concept and theme to explore, and there are many female figures in history that I think have received a maligned depiction, and this is something I really want to explore further throughout our music. Goodbye for today.